Thank you. Yes, and I will start by sharing my slides. So, hi, my name is Anna Åberg, and I've been the task leader for this first phase of the task, which is called Empowering All, Just and Inclusive Energy Transitions, but it's also gone under the name of the Gender and Energy Task. And this is going to be a bit of a quick and dirty sort of run through of some of our main findings and activities, but we have most of our publications on our webpage, so please, if you're interested in details, go there. And we're also publishing 2 synthesizing reports during the fall that summarizes our work, so please keep your eyes open for that. This task has had 6 countries participating: the US, Ireland, the Netherlands, Austria, Sweden, and Australia. And we've been working for 3 years in 3 different subtasks. The first subtask is called Learning Across Regions and Best Practices, and here Helene Åberg has been the task leader, and here the aim has been to gather existing research on energy, gender and use, and also to do a case study of a good practice example. And this has been the Solar Mamas in Zanzibar that you can see on the picture, and I will return to that later on. In subtask 2, we have looked at policy, understanding and countering systematic inertias in policy. Here, Marielle Veenstra and Joy Clancy from the Netherlands, from 75 Inc., has been the subtask leaders. And this subtask has resulted in several reports with policy advice, also some master thesis, and a gender just policy framework, as well as a board game that you can see a picture of here. And also members of the task have participated in the gender assessment of the Fit for 55 package, for example. In subtask 3, we have worked with designing inclusive and efficient technological inventions, and I've been the subtask leader also for that task. And here the aim was to develop guidelines and prototypes for more gender-aware and efficient technologies and interventions, and that includes methods for collecting user data and for user engagement. And we've been doing this with case study design methods, as well as workshops with technology designer, etc. And I will return to the different outcomes of these subtasks during the rest of this presentation. So one can say that in these 3 subtasks and in the whole task, we have worked broadly and intersectionally with the concept of gender. That means that all the relationships between genders and how they affect energy use is one of our main themes. Our aim has also been to look at how gender intersects with other social and structural characteristics. So today, as you will see, I will sometimes talk about and point out things that are relevant for all users groups, so to speak. Because one of the most important things that we also have found is that it's crucial to start from users' realities if you want to be able to take into account their gendered experiences as well. So there is difficult to separate sometimes the focus on users and the focus on gender. So as you will also see, I think. As I mentioned, subtask 1 included a global literature overview of literature on energy users, gender, and policy. And from this global research review, we have identified several ways in which users are excluded from our energy systems. And I'd like to point out 3 here that you will also see that we have tried to address during our work. And the first one is exclusion from energy services. This includes energy poverty and lack of access, of course, to energy services in both low and high income countries. And here we know also that women are statistically worse off than men, in particularly elderly women. But there's also a lot of intersectional characteristics, such as rurality and financial situations that are important for energy poverty issues. The next one is exclusion from the current policy and technology interventions that are being proposed for the energy transition. Research shows that the current technical and policy solutions that are proposed are often designed for high-income households and homeowners, and often those who are tech interested and savvy, and less for those who rent or cannot afford investing in infrastructure or electric vehicles, for example, or even those who are interested in other solutions, such as behavioral change. In addition to this, things like new green jobs policies for the energy transitions are expected to come mostly in the construction sector. And this is historically one of the most male-dominated sectors, which also goes with the energy sector, of course. And this means that in order to make sure that these jobs also become open to other groups and to women, there has to be initiatives to make sure that that happens. A third type of exclusion that we've been looking at also is the exclusion from knowledge, or knowledge exclusion, and expertise exclusion, as we call it. And this quote here, we did not expect that there would be so much technology in the house that we don't understand anything about. It comes from a case study that our project participants from the Netherlands, led by Sylvia Breukers, did at a smart grid test site. And in this case study, we've seen that the solutions, smart grid solutions, for example, in this case, are rather creating a loss of control because they are difficult to understand, they are high-tech and black-boxed. On the other hand, it's also clear that when having been developed, these smart grids have not taken into account the expertise of users on their own energy use. So this kind of exclusion of user needs and expertise is also often gendered and hits harder on marginalized groups. So for the next of this part of this talk, or for the rest of the talk actually, I will look at a few drivers of exclusions that we have identified, and also some recommendations and good practices for what we can do to mitigate those drivers. This is, of course, not an exhaustive list, as you understand. There's some main ones and the ones that tie in with examples of what we have been doing in our task. The first driver of exclusion, as we call it, are the current framings of users that come from the energy sectors that are problematic because they often rest upon implicit social hierarchies and norms, and this includes gendered ones. The first thing that, in particular, a couple of problems that have been brought up in the literature review that has been that we can see is that there's a homogenization of users. Users, at least in high-income countries in particular, are often envisioned as a tech-interested person with a lot of both financial, technological knowledge and social resources. And this becomes sort of a very narrow norm. On the other hand, user roles and needs are also often assumed to be static, which means that they are not open to sort of new roles that come in or changes over time, which is of course a problem when we want to transition. The second problem is stereotyping of different ways, both of households and users, women and men, for example. And when it comes to households, households are often stereotyped as a heteronormal family with children on the one hand. At the same time, household user technical solutions often focus on individuality, especially through individualized apps that are developed by utilities for household to sort of follow their energy use, for example. So there's a tension here between the household being sort of a homogenized unit, but at the same time, some of the technical solutions are placed on an individual level. Women or men are also narrowly stereotyped. However, and even more stereotyped is, in particular, how users, in particular women users, are stereotypes that come from the global south or low-income countries in general. Women that come from low-income countries are often seen as victims of drudgery in the so-called, while women in high-income countries are often, sometimes not even conceptualized as energy users, but more here the effort is more focusing on getting women into tech or energy sectors. So they are sort of in the shadow or getting into this homogenization of users that I was talking about instead. So these are a couple of different stereotypes that are going on. And one main problem that drives these stereotypical framings is that we have a lack of disaggregated and power-aware quantitative data. We also have a lack of qualitative data, actually. But when it comes to quantitative data that exists, sometimes there's no disaggregated data at all. For example, a survey made for the EU citizens to comment on the Fit for 55 framework had almost no data at all on economic situations or other things that could have allowed for a deeper study of the people that commented on this framework. And our Dutch case study from subtask 2 has also brought up that in one Dutch case, at least 13% of Dutch households could just not be accounted for in statistics due to the nature of their residences. So we have this lack of data and especially disaggregated, but at the same time, we also have an over-reliance on quantitative data. So these are sort of problems for how we can, they're sort of standing in the way for a more nuanced view of users. So we have a couple of recommendations then for what to do about this. The first one is, of course, to develop nuanced tools for quantitative data collections. And these tools need to sort of open up different user experience, for example, in multiple ways of expressing gender identity, but also open up the household to show a bigger diversity. What you see here on the image is a part of the OECD EPIC Household Survey that had data collection going on in 2022. And from our task, 3 members of our task from Chalmers, they were part of this, of designing this household survey and trying to ensure that the survey applied more nuanced understanding of sex and gender and avoided stereotyping energy users or households. And here is one example then of how they conceptualize the choices for people regarding which types of households they live in. In our continuing in our task and building on this OECD survey, our Austrian members, Asada Badriani, Janne Wanner, and Beatrix Hausners, in consultation with the Helena Åberg and Kavya Michael, who were earlier working on this, they have refined this survey, focusing on the Austrian case, trying to better capture Austrian residential energy use, behaviors, and norms. And then they have also incorporated experience from the recent energy crisis, as well as trying to incorporate a more nuanced understanding of sex and gender, and placing greater emphasis on household power dynamics, task distribution, care work, and decision-making processes. And this is a survey that we hope to be able to launch during our next phase. Our design group, Boyd, has also developed a household energy planner solution that allows people to consider their energy use, but which does not focus on individual apps in people's phones, just showing energy using sort of gigawatt hours, etc. And what they want to do with this is to open up the household, but also focus on relational aspects of energy. So for them, their energy planner is centrally placed in the house. It, instead of centering around individuals, it centers around the relational aspects. And they use daily activities as a starting point for a discussion about energy use. And the aim is to involve all household members in what they call household energy management. And this is a way to try to mitigate the risk that is often the case that only one person, which is statistically, the male person, takes on the role of being sort of the energy technology manager in the household. And this is a way to try to spread that out a bit. When it comes to mitigating stereotyping women and men, one important part is to focus not only on female empowerment, as has been done, especially in the global north, but also on masculinity norms, to ensure a broader discussion of how different gender norms affect energy use. Because today, both masculinity norms and femininity norms seem to affect both energy use in different countries, as well as attitudes towards, for example, behavioral change. So we need to focus more broadly than on women only, and include research on men and masculinities. And in our task, we have translated a material that was first developed in Swedish, which is about trying to help people to talk about masculinity norms in different settings. Another good example of this is the Solar Mamas project in Zanzibar, but I will return to that later on. To mitigate stereotyping of low-income countries, we also need to sort of promote and facilitate the reversal of knowledge from low-income countries to high-income countries, because there's a lot of valuable insight coming from these countries in terms of just energy transitions. And good practices from there can be actively studied, and elements could be applied in high-income countries. And this could foster better transitions, as well as hopefully mitigate some stereotyping. We also need to adopt mixed methods to counter the over-reliance on quantitative data. And here, this is in general importance. We can, for example, adopt things like action research, policy experiments, sandbox work, time studies, etc. So we come to our second driver, which I've touched upon a bit, and that is that users' needs are not being met or considered in technology design as much as they should be. Our research on, if you go back to our research on smart home technologies, it reveals that the current technical approaches lack what they call household management literacy, which means that there's a sort of gap between what household management needs of the users and what the actual technologies do. And women, elderly populations, and socioeconomically vulnerable individuals are disproportionately impacted by such design. And also, the prevailing emphasis on high-tech solutions stifles innovations that could leverage existing technologies or promote behavioral modification or social innovation in the innovation instead. So our recommendations and good practice examples for this is, first of all, empower users by addressing knowledge exclusion as part of energy transition projects. And here I want to show the example of our case study from Subtask 1 on the Solar Mamas in Zanzibar. Because through this Solar Mamas program, women without previous education, they were taught to become solar panel engineers, which then, of course, empowered their role in the community. But in this project, empowerment actually extended beyond the individual women that were trained as solar engineers, and it encompassed also their male partners and the entire community, which led to fostering of a collaborative environment where knowledge sharing and sustainable practices were a part of empowering all the users in the village to actively participate and benefit from this transition. And this is where we think that a lot of learning can be done. Another way to empower users can be to focus on low-tech instead and easily used solutions that fit many. And our household planner that I mentioned is deliberately low-tech. But here I also want to lift an example from our sister task, the hard-to-reach task, where they developed a heat kit using already existing and easy-to-use technologies that were distributed through local libraries. And they were especially useful in families with young children and teenagers, and quite a few of single mothers as well. So this is a way of making technology accessible to people. We also need to develop new, but also use existing gender and social inclusion aware design methods. And in Subtask 3, our participants from Gut in Austria have developed a fact sheet through workshops with technology developers to support more inclusive technology design. And there they go through steps of what to think about in order to ensure inclusion and gender awareness. And this fact sheet can be found on our webpage and is part of our educational material. When developing the household planners, our designers Boyd used the norm creative design methods, and there are several other examples of methods and tools that could be used, and we outline more of those in our forthcoming report. Our third driver is policy siloing. This is a significant issue that's related to a historical framing of energy policy in many countries so it's isolated from social policy and other policy domains to a large extent, such as education, healthcare, and enterprise. And there's a lack of coordination between energy and social policies. And this separation is a pervasive problem across many countries, and it has to be addressed, especially if we want to address issues such as energy poverty, which needs to be addressed in an integrated way. If we do this in an integrated way, if we can address it, it will also have multiple benefits, such as improved health, job creation, and meeting climate goals. So if we can get the synergies between social energy and energy policy, we have to sort of move away from silo policy development and align sort of targets between energy, housing, health, and social welfare. And this is then our first recommendation for this, is that we need to integrate gender and social inclusion concerns into energy policy. And one example I wanted to give of this is the current efforts in Indonesia, who is currently committing to a gender just transition in its net zero emissions policy, which means that they have to include justice issues in all the policies that will lead there from the beginning. And I think it's interesting to look at, if you look at the practice of the Fit for 55 framework for the EU, for example, where that was developed first, and then some members, for example, of our task has been there to do a gender assessment of it. And this is in a way the wrong order. Gender issues have to be part already from the beginning. We also recommend that we enhance interdepartmental coordination and also use participatory processes for designing inclusive and user-centered policies. I'm not going to go into detail about this. In our report, we also bringing examples from other people who do this. For example, there are, for the interdepartmental coordination, there are gender offices in several countries, such as Rwanda, India, and Sweden. And participatory processes for designing center policies has been used, for example, by the organization Energia. And we give examples of this in our report. We also recommend that we use gender-aware policy tools for planning and assessment. And here, in subtask 2, one of our project participants, Marielle Fjenstra, has developed a gender-just policy framework that elaborates on earlier justice frameworks. As you can see here, we have the tenets of energy justice, but also adding the elements of energy and specific criteria. And this policy tool will be presented in a policy brief also coming this fall. Yes. And my final driver. Driver 4. There is a lack of middle actors, institutions, and platforms between policymakers, utilities, and users. Insufficient actors, there's insufficient actors that can bridge the sort of between the macro level policy decisions and practical user engagements. And this is especially on the municipal level, many countries lack designated actors for energy issues because energy policy is typically centralized at the national level. On the other hand, on a distributional level, this lack of governance authorities should ideally be compensated by energy utilities, who should have the direct connection to users. But the interaction between users and utilities are often just one-sided, and this leaves users to navigate individual solutions and also navigate these different gendered and social exclusions that are going on. Users can often face even basic issues, such as not knowing whom to contact when a smart house system malfunctions, as in our Netherlands case. And this also results in confusion over responsibility allocation between governance levels and utilities. Some recommendations from us regarding this is the first one: empower local communities and diverse groups and listen to them. The last part there is important. For example, energy citizenship can be a starting point to empower users and offer various engagement pathways in the energy system, trying to sort of reinforce citizens' roles and contributions to the energy transition. And this can includes on several different levels, both at the city level, a municipal level, and within the home. And in our task, energy citizenship work has been undertaken by task members from UC Cork in Ireland, Niall Dunphy, Breffney Lennon, and Alexandra Reves. And this includes a review where they have been engaging with citizens and practitioners and experts using a mixed methods approach. And from this research, they have developed a typology of energy citizenship, which encompasses 4 categories: access to energy, energy consumption, energy production, and policies and governance. And this is one way of focusing on communities and citizenship. I think it's also worth doing a shout out to the Hard to Reach task again here, which have developed framings for community engagement that are well worth looking at. But also we can strengthen existing intermediary actors. One example from our work is also from the Austrian task members, who have written about how energy advisors have the potential to address gender and social issues, given adequate support through education, mandate, and funding. And this is includes that we need to make this advice available to tenants, not only homeowners. And these energy advisors need education on intersectional issues of vulnerabilities, for example. And here, municipalities can also play a crucial role. Our policy work in subtask 2, summarized by Joy Clancy, also shows that municipalities can play major roles in a lot of different ways. For example, by diversifying the workforce and enabling new green jobs. But they can also do it by improving the energy efficiency of buildings that they are responsible for. And they also have the power to lay down procurement processes and employment conditions to make sure that gender aspects are part of, for example, renovation work. And they are, of course, also crucial in doing work on energy poverty. And can also support this work with energy consultant. Also, in countries like Sweden, that has a strong tradition of mid-level municipal energy utilities, users actually demonstrate a greater user trust. And it's also been demonstrated that there's better reinvestment in infrastructure compared to national commercial utilities. But also, there can be new and innovative forms of public-private partnerships. In several cases, for example, the Zanzibar case, or the POIST project for the electrification of the Maldives, in which our Australian task member, Rehana Mohideen, has been involved, and similar projects in Kerala and India, for example. There have been different ways of engaging existing local organization and governance structures to support the energy transition and ensure long-term maintenance and technological support of new systems. In the POIST case, for example, the Maldives case, the women development councils on the different islands were crucial both for building trust and support, but also for taking responsibility for newly built industrial infrastructures, as well to support empowerment and technical education for women. So these different types of institutions can be helpful in very many different ways. However, Clancy, Fjellstein, and Kruger from our subtask 2 also point out that in a Dutch case study, where there was a lack of national policy for energy poverty, and municipalities developed their own policies as well. So this also has happened in the Netherlands. But they also point out that this can result in spatial injustices. So we have to be aware of that these kinds of, to sort of be aware of that we need to help then make sure that this happens in all municipalities. As a final point, we need resource allocation is one of the main things, sort of inertias in all of this. There's a lack of course, there's a lack of funding balance between tech work and social science work and between high income and low income countries. But also for this kind of empowerment work with users, work on repair, work on maintenance, technical support, all of these things that come after almost always innovation as well. And here we have to look at funding structures for these kinds of things. To end, I want to highlight the importance of not letting the climate urgency displace social urgency. Climate change is a grave threat that's already affecting in particular marginalized groups globally. But there's still no sort of quick fix for an inclusive and just energy transition. So when transitioning to a new energy system, we need to not make the same mistakes that have been made in the current energy system. And that's what we are then trying to help prevent. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna, for a great start to today's session. Camilla, I think you're going to share your slides next, and we'll move on to the second part of our webinar.
Yes. Let's see. Does that work?
Yes.
Yeah. Good. Okay, yeah, thank you. My name is Camilla Andersson, and I'm a researcher with a focus on gender and energy, justice and sustainability. And I will take on the task leader role for phase 2. So I will present a sort of outline for what we have planned for phase 2. The second phase of the task is, of course, responding to the challenges that emerged in phase 1 that Anna just presented. So each subtask corresponds to one of these challenges. And the first one is, as Anna also talked about, the stereotypical norms and framings of users that act as drivers of exclusion. So subtask 1 will be concerned with the reframing of just energy transitions. The next challenge we see is that there's an exclusion in policy, governance, and implementation design. So subtask 2 will be looking at how we can narrow the gap between users and policy. And lastly, there's an exclusion of users from knowledge, but also as knowers and experts of their own energy use. So subtask 3 will be prototyping inclusive interventions and technologies. And lastly, we have subtask 4, which will engage in setting up a knowledge hub help desk. I will go deeper into these subtasks, beginning with subtask number 1, the reframing of just energy transitions. And as Anna said, the global reviews in phase 1 of the task that I can really recommend to read. They're extremely rich, and they have analyzed dominant framings of users in the global south as well as the global north, and found that these framings are often stereotypical and misleading. And this might be something that has contributed to the fact that the uptake of smart technologies has been slower than anticipated. And as Anna also mentioned, there are differences in focus in these spheres, where women in the global south are often portrayed as vulnerable and lacking agency, while women in the global north are standing in the shadow of an imagined resource man. So phase 2 of the task endeavors a diversification of user framings in order to make them more relevant for the development of policy and technologies for energy transitions. And as our researchers have pointed out in their report to the FEM committee, disaggregated data is crucial to incorporate gender mainstreaming and an understanding of intersectional aspects such as class and race into the policymaking process. As Anna said, disaggregated data collection is complex and methodologically challenging, where quantitative data tends towards generalized claims, and group level data does not really account for certain patterns, nor if and how they can be addressed in order to achieve just energy transitions. So our researchers argue for the development of mixed methods and relational approaches that study gender as a dynamic and social category, and focus on how stereotypical behaviors and norms may change in relation to new technologies and patterns of energy use. So in phase 2, we will continue building on this work that Anna talked about, inspired by the OECD EPIC household survey data. A new survey instrument will be developed that aims to capture the household level gender dynamics in access to and control of energy services. And it will also attempt to decipher how energy transitions can potentially alter these household level gender dynamics. So this will be a methodological tool that can serve as a template for similar studies elsewhere. We will emphasize indigenous perspectives, which are particularly relevant in relation to the changing energy landscape, where extractive activities affect traditional livelihoods. In phase 1, we have already and will continue to deepen understandings of masculinities and how they shape the discourse on energy transitions. these norms are very persistent and powerful within the energy sector, and they inevitably affect the polarization that we see now in relation to the energy discourse, the production and use across the globe. So groundbreaking work on identifying and mapping out masculinities has been done in the task, and will continue with a focus on how to move from polarizing masculinities to caring form of masculinities, which actively support and promote transitions to sustainable energy systems. And moving on to subtask 2, the revised Energy Efficiency Directive significantly raises the EU's ambition on energy efficiency. And a supportive infrastructure is key to the realization of this. And under the revised directive, EU countries will need to ensure an infrastructure with competence operating on all levels, such as energy service providers, energy auditors, energy managers, and installers. And this infrastructure, of course, should be just and inclusive. However, the energy sector is one of the least gender diverse sectors of the global economy. So phase 2 of the Empowering All task will explore various forms of supportive infrastructure to promote just and inclusive energy transitions. And one of the things that we will do is look at small and medium enterprises, SMEs, which is a sector that employs many women, both in the global north and in the global south. Especially the service sector employs many women. But this sector was unproportionately affected by the energy crisis, but was overlooked in terms of support during that period. So phase 2 will explore in which ways policy can provide a scaffolding structure for this sector. Energy communities is something that is receiving increasing attention from EU climate and energy policy, one example being the Clean Energy Package. So energy communities are put forward as a way of involving citizens and bring about democratization of energy provision with a focus on renewable sources in the transition to a low carbon energy landscape. However, participation in energy communities unfortunately demonstrates less diversity than hoped for, and women, ethnic groups, and young people are underrepresented. So in phase 2, we will look further into how the surrounding infrastructure can support and emphasize the justice aspects. And we will also look into evaluations of the outcome of existing energy communities in terms of justice and inclusivity. And subtask 3 will focus on prototyping, and especially the prototyping of inclusive interventions and technologies. So subtask 3A will look beyond smart grids towards new understandings of smartness in relation to energy citizenship. Subtask 3B will prototype low carbon sufficiency lifestyles in the built environment. And subtask 3C will prototype gender-sensitive energy engagement tools, such as the power plan that was conceived in phase 1. So lastly, subtask 4, the Knowledge Hub Help Desk, is closely related to this. And with the setting up of the Knowledge Hub Help Desk, we aim to encourage and support the integration of justice, gender, and intersectional perspectives into more tech-oriented technology collaboration programs within the IEA structures and beyond. And in phase 2, we will continue our participation in the IEEE JESI group, developing new standards for gender equality and social inclusion in new digital energy services. In phase 1, one of our members has developed models integrating socio-demographic layers. It's the green layer here. And the additional socio-demographic layer will influence and even determine the strategy and business input in the original model. So this is one example of how our work can be supportive within the this help desk model. And the work on prototyping in subtask 3 includes prototypes of products and processes and policy recommendations that aim to facilitate the development of these kinds of products in the various sectors and industries. And this will, of course, also feed into the Knowledge Hub and help building bridges and collaborations between our research and more tech-oriented technology development. Thank you.